the story of the third atomic bomb. It's a ghost in the annals of history, a chilling footnote swallowed whole by the cataclysm of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yet, this wasn't just a lost detail, it was a heart-stopping moment in the 20th century, a razor's edge where the entire future of conflict and the fragile dance of diplomacy hung by the thinnest of threads, threatening to snap. On August 9, 1945, as the second atomic bomb tore the sky above Nagasaki, most people across the globe clung to a desperate, almost prayerful assumption: surely America had exhausted its terrifying new arsenal. They believed, with a collective, anxious breath, that these two horrific acts represented the full, brutal extent of the Manhattan Project's deadly harvest. This widespread belief, however, was fundamentally, profoundly wrong. Even as that infamous mushroom cloud billowed ominously over Nagasaki's ruins, a dedicated group of brilliant, yet visibly strained, scientists and tireless technicians at Los Alamos were already hard at work, meticulously preparing the core for a third atomic weapon. And President Harry Truman, his shoulders weighed down by an unimaginable burden, was intensely considering the precise, fateful spot where this next devastating bomb would fall. The colossal industrial endeavor that was the Manhattan Project didn't just produce two bombs and then shut down. No, it was far from over. The vast, intricate industrial complex, painstakingly built and sprawling across the very heart of America, continued its relentless, unseen work. From the gargantuan uranium enrichment facilities humming day and night in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to the secretive plutonium production reactors, churning out deadly material at Hanford, Washington, and extending to the sophisticated weapon assembly laboratories tucked away in Los Alamos, New Mexico, every single part of this terrifying apparatus maintained its full, chilling capacity. General Leslie Groves, the stern, unyielding military commander overseeing it all, had personally established a rigid production schedule designed to deliver atomic bomb cores at a frighteningly steady rate. The critical third plutonium core was specifically slated for completion by August 19, 1945, a mere 10 days after the inferno of Nagasaki. More cores were set to follow in rapid succession, arriving every 3 to 4 days, pushing through August and relentlessly into September. The rate of production, disturbingly, was actually projected to accelerate as the intricate industrial processes became ever more refined, efficient, and horrifyingly streamlined. This third bomb, then, was no mere theory, no distant, abstract plan. It was a tangible, material reality, a mechanism of utter destruction rapidly nearing its final, devastating completion. The intricate plutonium core, painstakingly fashioned from the exotic, man-made element from Hanford, was being shaped and machined with chilling precision at Los Alamos. The conventional high-explosive lenses, precisely engineered to compress this core to achieve its critical, destructive mass, were undergoing relentless manufacturing and rigorous testing. Even the distinctive ballistic casing, famously known as Fat Man, due to its rotund shape required to house the complex implosion mechanism, was in its final stages of assembly. Everything was proceeding with a chilling adherence to schedule. And military planners, their faces grim, weren't just discussing the imminent third bomb. They were actively envisioning a sustained, relentless atomic bombing campaign that could stretch throughout the autumn of 1945 and potentially deep into 1946 if Japan stubbornly refused to yield. The profound question of exactly where President Truman intended to unleash this third bomb forces us to understand the urgent, often desperate strategic thinking that gripped Washington during those tense, sweltering August days. The original, grim target list for atomic weapons had been compiled through an exhaustive, meticulous process involving top military strategists, brilliant but morally conflicted scientists, and sharp intelligence analysts. In the spring of 1945, the clandestine target committee had convened multiple times, meticulously selecting cities that met a very specific, chilling set of criteria. These targets absolutely had to be significant enough that their utter destruction would unequivocally demonstrate the bomb's terrifying, unprecedented power, aiming to convince the unyielding Japanese leaders that any continued resistance was nothing short of futile. Crucially, they also needed to be relatively untouched and undamaged by prior conventional bombing raids, ensuring that the atomic bomb's unique, singular destructive power would be starkly and unmistakably evident. Finally, they were theoretically chosen for their military or industrial value, not purely civilian populations, or so the official line went. Though, in the brutal, horrifying reality of war, this supposed distinction became grotesquely, tragically blurred. The original, chilling list included Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, and Nagasaki. Kyoto, the ancient, revered capital and profound cultural heart of Japan, had initially sat at the very top of this grim list due to its considerable size and vital industrial capacity. But, in a truly remarkable act of personal intervention, Secretary of War Henry Stimson had personally stepped in to remove it, passionately arguing that obliterating such a culturally priceless and deeply significant city would inevitably sow seeds of lasting enmity, making any genuine post-war reconciliation utterly impossible. He saw the human cost beyond the immediate conflict. After the twin hammer blows struck Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a mere 2 cities from that initial, dreaded list still remained Kokura and Niigata. But the radar for destruction had expanded. Military planners, relentless in their grim task, had meticulously identified several other formidable potential targets, including Tokyo itself, a city that, despite suffering extensive, brutal firebombing, still harbored crucially important military and governmental facilities. Other industrial powerhouses like Yokohama, Osaka, and Kobe were also firmly on the radar. The accumulating evidence strongly suggests that Tokyo, the very beating heart of the Japanese Empire, was rapidly emerging as the chillingly preferred target for the third atomic bomb. This decision, had it come to pass, would have represented a dramatically terrifying escalation. For Tokyo was not merely another city, it was the sacred, political, and symbolic soul of the entire Japanese Empire. The revered imperial palace, where Emperor Hirohito himself resided, stood majestically in central Tokyo, a symbol of national identity. The myriad government ministries that steadfastly directed the entire war effort were concentrated there, a hive of crucial decision-making. Destroying Tokyo with an atomic weapon would have hurled an unmistakable, earth-shattering message across the world. No corner of Japan was safe. That even the hallowed, sacred person of the emperor himself could not be shielded from this horrifying, new form of warfare. General Henry Arnold, the commanding general of the formidable Army Air Forces, had chillingly received authorization to continue atomic bombing operations without requiring explicit presidential approval for each subsequent individual strike. On July 25, 1945, the directive, starkly issued, unambiguously stated that additional bombs would be delivered on designated targets as soon as they were manufactured and made ready. This chilling instruction meant that once the third bomb was fully completed, it could be swiftly shipped to Tinian Island, the operational base where the veteran 509th Composite Group waited with their specially modified B-29 bombers, and then dropped within a matter of mere days. The terrifying machinery of atomic warfare had been inexorably set in motion, and halting its relentless momentum would have demanded active, decisive intervention rather than any passive delay. The path of destruction was preset. Truman's agonizing thinking during this tumultuous period reveals the intricate, often contradictory calculations of a leader desperately striving to bring a catastrophic war to its bloody conclusion, all while grappling with weapons whose sheer destructive power transcended anything ever witnessed in human experience. In his poignant public statements and the deeply private jottings within his diary, Truman grappled with a profound duality. He expressed both an unyielding determination to force Japan's immediate surrender and a palpable, growing discomfort with the sheer, indiscriminate mass killing of civilians. After the horrifying details of Hiroshima's devastation reached his ears, he reportedly confided to his cabinet, his voice heavy with grief, that he did not want to kill all those children. Yet he also held a deeply rooted conviction, heavily influenced by grim intelligence estimates and the bitter, costly experience of island-hopping combat in the Pacific, that a full-scale invasion of Japan's home islands would inevitably result in hundreds of thousands of American casualties and, perhaps even more tragically, potentially millions of Japanese deaths. The clock was ticking, a relentless countdown in multiple, terrifying ways, throughout those crucial days of mid August 1945. Every agonizing day that Japan defiantly continued fighting meant prolonged, brutal suffering for Allied prisoners of war, held captive in horrific conditions across Asia. It meant continued starvation and brutal oppression for countless populations languishing under Japanese occupation. And it meant continued, agonizing combat deaths in the vast theaters of China, Burma, and throughout the unforgiving Pacific. On August 8, 1945, the colossal Soviet Union had, as promised at the Yalta Conference, dramatically entered the war against Japan, and Soviet forces were now rapidly, overwhelmingly advancing through Manchuria, abruptly creating a host of new, complex geopolitical complications. Stalin's battle-hardened armies were demonstrating, with terrifying speed, that the formidable Soviet military machine, honed by 4 brutal years of total war against Germany, could crush Japanese forces with shocking, decisive efficiency. This sudden, overwhelming advance raised the chilling prospect that if Japan did not surrender with astonishing swiftness, Soviet forces might well occupy significant portions of Japanese territory, including, horrifyingly, potentially the northern home islands. This scenario threatened to create a divided occupation, eerily similar to the tragic divisions that would soon scar both Germany and Korea. The Japanese government itself was paralyzed by deep internal divisions during these absolutely crucial days. Even after the inferno of Hiroshima, even after the subsequent horror of Nagasaki, and even after the stunning, swift Soviet invasion of Manchuria, the Supreme Council for the direction of the war remained hopelessly deadlocked. The so-called peace faction, led by the pragmatic Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo and the cautious Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yonai, desperately argued for accepting the Potsdam Declaration's terms for unconditional surrender, with the singular, non-negotiable condition that the revered imperial system be preserved. In stark contrast, the entrenched military faction, spearheaded by the unyielding War Minister Korechika Anami and the hawkish chiefs of the Army and Navy General Staffs, stubbornly insisted on multiple, impossible conditions, including no occupation of Japan proper, Japanese handling of their own war criminals, and a self-directed disarmament. This crippling deadlock meant that even as Japanese cities continued to burn and the atomic bombs rained down, the government found itself tragically unable to act decisively. Emperor Hirohito's role became profoundly decisive precisely because of this debilitating governmental paralysis. In an unprecedented, truly historic intervention on August 10, 1945, and again even more forcefully, on August 14, 1945, after a desperate, foiled military coup attempt by officers vehemently opposed to surrender, the emperor courageously broke with centuries of tradition and actively, unequivocally directed his government to accept the Allied terms. This singular, pivotal intervention likely averted the dropping of the third atomic bomb, and quite possibly, many more beyond that. But it was, by any measure, an extraordinarily, terrifyingly close call. Had the emperor not intervened, had the military faction succeeded in their desperate, last-ditch coup attempt, the relentless atomic bombing campaign would have tragically, undeniably continued. Indeed, the third bomb's meticulously prepared plutonium core did physically arrive at Tinian Island. But by August 15, 1945, Japan had already formally agreed to surrender. This particular core, rather than being unleashed upon a devastated Japanese city, ultimately served a dramatically different purpose. In 1946, this core eventually became the heart of the fourth nuclear weapon ever detonated, not in the crucible of war, but in the chilling test series conducted at Bikini Atoll. It was a stark reminder that the terrible knowledge was here to stay. The immense infrastructure and specialized expertise that had been so rapidly mobilized to produce these terrifying weapons did not simply vanish after Japan's surrender. Instead, it became the formidable foundation of America's rapidly expanding Cold War nuclear arsenal, a chilling testament to humanity's continued technological and strategic evolution. And, inevitably, the terrible, world-altering knowledge of how to construct and wield these weapons inexorably spread to other powerful nations, thereby creating the precarious, fear-laden balance of nuclear deterrence that would tragically define the entire second half of the 20th century. The profound implications of what almost transpired with the third bomb stretch far beyond the immediate, agonizing question of how Japan would have responded to a cascade of additional atomic strikes. If Tokyo, the beating heart of Japan, had been utterly destroyed by another atomic bomb, killing potentially hundreds of thousands more innocent people, including, horrifyingly, possibly Emperor Hirohito himself, the entire post-war order in Asia might have developed along radically different, unimaginable lines. The successful, delicate occupation of Japan relied heavily on preserving the imperial system and working cooperatively through the emperor to legitimize crucial reforms. Without that vital, stabilizing institution, Japan's arduous reconstruction could have been immeasurably more chaotic, fraught, and contentious. Furthermore, the stark, brutal demonstration of American willingness to obliterate even the most sacred symbols of Japanese culture might have cultivated deeper, more enduring enmity, making the eventual, crucial alliance between America and Japan far more difficult, if not impossible, to forge. The devastating strategic bombing campaign against Japan, encompassing both conventional and atomic methods, stands as one of the most troubling and morally ambiguous chapters of American military history. On March 9 and 10, 1945, the horrific firebombing of Tokyo, a night of unimaginable terror, tragically claimed more lives in a single, infernal night than the atomic bomb unleashed on Hiroshima. Dozens of other Japanese cities were systematically, relentlessly destroyed by incendiary raids, explicitly designed to maximize civilian casualties and shatter Japanese morale. The atomic bombs were distinct, not in their targeting of civilian populations, a grim practice that conventional bombing had already horrifyingly normalized, but in their terrifying efficiency, their immense shock value, and their chilling demonstration that a single aircraft, carrying a solitary bomb, possessed the power to utterly obliterate an entire city. The third bomb would have tragically continued this devastating pattern, and the fourth, fifth, and sixth bombs, already in various stages of production, would have inexorably followed. This was the dark future that was barely averted. Some historians have passionately argued that the atomic bombs were ultimately unnecessary, contending that Japan was already decisively defeated and would have surrendered within a matter of weeks or months, due to the suffocating naval blockade strangling its economy, and the sudden, overwhelming Soviet entry into the war demolishing its last remaining armies in mainland Asia. Others staunchly maintain that the bombs were absolutely essential to achieving surrender, without resorting to a catastrophically costly invasion, pointing to the unyielding military factions' continued resistance, even after 2 atomic bombs and the Soviet invasion. The complex truth likely resides somewhere between these two deeply polarized positions, further complicated by the immutable fact that we simply cannot rerun history to observe what might have unfolded under different, hypothetical scenarios. What we can assert with absolute certainty is that American leaders, in August 1945, firmly believed they needed to continue applying maximum, unrelenting pressure, including the option of atomic bombing, to compel Japan's surrender before the scheduled, horrific November invasion of Kyushu. The meticulously planned production schedule for additional atomic bombs throughout August and September 1945 chillingly reveals the extent to which atomic warfare was rapidly becoming systematized and distressingly routine, rather than being treated as something uniquely special and exceptional. By late August 1945, Los Alamos confidently anticipated delivering cores at a rate that would have supported 2 to 3 atomic bombing missions per week by September. The experienced 509th Composite Group possessed multiple aircraft and highly trained crews specifically prepared for these atomic missions. The entire infrastructure for transporting, assembling, and delivering atomic weapons was functioning with chilling, efficient precision. Had the war continued, atomic bombing would have simply transitioned into another grim tool in the vast American arsenal, utilized alongside conventional bombing, naval bombardment, and the preparations for a full-scale invasion. The unique, almost singular nature of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as war-ending events was not an inevitable outcome, but rather the direct consequence of Japan's timely surrender, which miraculously prevented what might have otherwise become a sustained, horrific atomic bombing campaign. General Douglas MacArthur, the formidable figure designated to command the full-scale invasion of Japan, had initially harbored deep skepticism about the atomic bomb's strategic value, viewing it as a mere sideshow compared to the massive conventional forces being meticulously assembled for Operation Downfall. After the profound shock of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, however, his views underwent a dramatic shift, and he came to deeply appreciate how these devastating bombs had undeniably obviated the desperate need for an invasion that would have consumed immeasurable resources and countless lives. Yet, MacArthur also possessed the keen strategic understanding that occupying Japan and transforming it into a peaceful, democratic nation would necessitate preserving enough of Japanese society and its vital institutions to function effectively. The complete, utter destruction of Tokyo by an atomic bomb might have tragically undermined this crucial goal by eliminating too much of the existing governmental and social structure, rendering true recovery impossible. The brilliant scientists who had painstakingly built the atomic bomb held widely varied views about its terrifying use. Some, like the visionary Leo Szilard and the thoughtful James Franck, had passionately advocated for a public demonstration of the bomb's power, rather than its direct use against cities, hoping that shocking Japan with a public display of this new weapon would be sufficient without incurring mass civilian casualties. Others, including the deeply conflicted Robert Oppenheimer and the vast majority of scientists diligently working on the project, supported using the bomb against military, industrial targets, though many later expressed profound ambivalence and deep regret about the monstrous weapons they had helped create. Still others, like the assertive Edward Teller, showed little discernible hesitation about the bomb's use and actively, vigorously promoted the continued development of even more powerful nuclear weapons. These fundamental disagreements continued to reverberate throughout the entire Cold War, with some Manhattan Project veterans becoming ardent advocates for arms control, while others paradoxically became staunch supporters of expanded nuclear arsenals. The third bomb, that terrifying device that was mercifully never dropped on Japan, represents a historical turning point that almost chillingly transpired but ultimately did not. In one alternate timeline, a horrifying reality we thankfully do not inhabit, that bomb plunged down upon Tokyo or another unsuspecting Japanese city, unleashing unimaginable destruction and killing tens or hundreds of thousands more innocent people, potentially including the venerated emperor himself, thereby creating ripple effects through post-war history that we can scarcely begin to fathom. In the timeline we do inhabit, however, Japan's surrender arrived just in the nick of time, a true stroke of historical fortune, to prevent this additional, catastrophic devastation. Though whether this prevention was due to sheer luck, impeccable timing, or the emperor's courageous, decisive intervention remains a subject of intense historical debate. What is absolutely certain is that the sophisticated apparatus existed to continue atomic bombing indefinitely, that military and political leaders were grimly prepared to wield these weapons repeatedly until Japan finally capitulated, and that only the historic surrender announcement on August 15, 1945, mercifully prevented the third bomb, and undoubtedly the fourth, and the fifth from ever falling upon Japanese cities during those final, tense weeks of summer in 1945. It was a close call, a moment of profound relief that history almost denied us.